Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, March 7th, 2024, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, February 29th, 2024, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, February 29, 2024.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 8, or the proposed notice of hearing associated with agenda item 9. Commissioner Nieto is recused from a discussion on agenda items 10 and 11. Chairperson Strand has informed me there is no need to discuss the suggested minute associated with agenda item 10. Approving the NENA project for upgrades to units 1 and 2 with all of the conditions outlined in the memorandum and the additional condition proposed by CUB requiring WP&L to report the final results of MISO's review of the requested interconnection service increase for NENA and denying WP&L's request for deferral accounting. Or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 11, approving the project to construct a combustion turbine and associated equipment upgrades at the Sheboygan Falls Units 1 and 2 with all of the conditions listed in the memorandum and including the condition proposed by CUB requiring WP&L to report to the Commission the final results of MISO's review of the requested interconnection service increase for Sheboygan Falls. WP&L may defer the retail share of revenue requirement impacts in account 182.3 with carrying costs at the applicant's most recently authorized short-term debt rate with all of the deferral conditions identified in the memorandum.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 1 through 5.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. And I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 6 through 8.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. I move we approve the notice of hearing associated with agenda item 9.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And in agenda item 10, docket number 6680, CE 185, the application of WP&L for a certificate of authority for construction and upgrades at the NENA generating station. I approve the item based on the Secretary's description. And in agenda item 11, docket number 6680, CE 186, the application of WP&L for a certificate of authority for construction and upgrades at the Sheboygan Falls generating station. I approve the item based on the Secretary's description. So that brings us to agenda item 12, which is docket number 5, CPF 2023, the Capital Projects Fund Broadband Infrastructure Grant Awards. So I will start that discussion now. So the Capital Projects Fund Broadband Infrastructure Grant Awards, which I will shorten and call CPF, is a product, of the American Rescue Plan Act. And a key priority of the CPF is to make funding available for reliable and affordable broadband infrastructure and other digital connectivity technology projects. The program is an important component of our overall broadband expansion efforts. A primary tenet of the PSC's mission is to ensure equitable access to broadband services. And through the exemplary efforts of our Wisconsin Broadband Office, we're making great progress in utilizing our funding opportunities to ensure all Wisconsinites have access to affordable broadband service. This CPF broadband infrastructure program has $42 million available for deployment of broadband infrastructure in areas lacking reliable access to wireline broadband service. So our commission staff have put in a great deal of work and planning to get us where we are today in our decision-making process. So just to recap what that looked like, on August 14th of 2023, the commission announced that it was accepting applications for CPF grants with applications due November 7th of 2023. And then the commission received 124 grant applications requesting a total of $221,616,886. The review process included a 3-week period to offer objections to proposed projects, followed by a 2-week period to respond to those objections. And a 3-member review panel evaluated the eligibility and merit of each application and prepared a merit score across each of the 10 scoring categories. Regarding those categories, the U.S. Department of Treasury identified specific scoring preferences and encouraged states to give priority to applications that included those components. Just to recap, the Treasury requirements and preferences include the following: affordability of service, last mile connection, the use of fiber optic technology, community engagement and planning, nonprofit, cooperative, or public ownership, design and performance of network, contiguous and complete project, cost-efficient and matching funds, no enforceable funding commitment, and highest need. Overall, I did find the scoring and review panel to be fair and the scoring of the review panel to be fair and reasonable, and I believe that this record demonstrates each application was thoroughly reviewed and judiciously evaluated. I do look forward to our ensuing discussion regarding the grant awards, but before we take up the various decision points associated with this docket, I would like to give my colleague, Commissioner Nieto, the opportunity to make any opening comments she has.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I'd echo your remarks. I think the broadband team did an excellent job here, and the memo and scoring were very clear, and I thought the alternatives proposed were fair and reasonable, all three of them. I think the applications we received were excellent, and would also thank the applicants for developing such great projects. Overall, as is usually the case with every round, we have more meritorious, excellent projects than we have funding. So that's the challenge, but the good news in that situation is I think we have multiple options and pathways to get the most impactful result for the state, because we do have so many great applications. And I think I will leave it at that for opening comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our first decision point in this docket is on filing matters. The application deadline for this grant round was 1:30 p.m. on November 7th, 2023. And at that time, the PSC grant system automatically closed and was unable to accept further submissions. The commission did receive a request in the docket to consider an application that a prospective applicant submitted after the deadline passed. Our commission guidance routinely emphasizes the importance of the filing deadline for grant applications, and applicants are strongly encouraged in their application webinar and instructions to begin their applications early and to submit them well in advance of the deadline. So that would put me at alternative 2, which would be to deny the request to consider the late application that was filed after the deadline. Commissioner Nieto?
I agree with you. I would be at alternative 2 to deny the request.
Okay, thank you. Our next decision point is on eligibility. Here, the applicants were required to meet 6 criteria to be considered for the grant, and those criteria are outlined in our staff memo. The panelists prepared a score for each application based on the merit criteria, and in addition, our staff reviewed the information provided in the applications, as well as in those objections and responses to objections that were received in relation to each application. This information was then applied against the previously discussed eligibility requirements. Following its analysis, the review panel did recommend 5 applications be removed from consideration due to findings that the project locations were either already substantially served by another qualifying broadband service, that the locations substantially overlapped with enforceable funding commitments for broadband expansion projects, and/or that the applicant had notable compliance issues on existing grants. So those applications are displayed in Table A of our commission memo. And because I agree with the overall approach that was used to evaluate these applications, I am supportive of removing the 5 applications due to their eligibility concerns, which would put me at alternative 1.
For this one, I started at alternative 3. I don't disagree with you. I think in the list of applications for funding, none of these came into play in terms of my selections. So I found that alternative 3 would have essentially the same effect, but preserve the ability for the applicant to come back at a later date. My selections generally wouldn't require me to make a determination at this time.
Okay, I'm gonna stay at 1 just to keep it, try to keep it cleaner, but we'll move on to our next one and then see where we wanna go from there. So the next decision point is the actual awarding of the grants. And just bring that up. So here, I want to first make mention that we did have $1,287,815 of remaining funds in our state and local fiscal recovery fund, which we love acronyms here, SLRF. And that allocation could be reallocated to support additional grant awards. So if we do approve this reallocation, Commission staff would contact selected applicants and offer them a revised SLURF grant agreement equivalent to those signed by original recipients, but with a performance period extending and then ending in 2026. Ultimately, I am in favor of the use and reallocation of SLURF funds. As was noted in our memo, we have received the necessary reallocation approvals to allow this to occur. And moreover, combining these funding sources shouldn't cause administrative issues because both programs have substantially similar eligibility and compliance requirements as they were both authorized under the same federal legislation, ARPA. So through the SLURF reallocation, the commission agenda memo recommended funding applications 438 and 542. And I would agree with that reallocation. And then for the CPF funding allocation, I will note, and Commissioner Nieto did a great job of highlighting this in her opening comments, that this is not a random occurrence that the demand for grant money exceeds our available funding, nor is it a random occurrence that many high-quality applications were submitted in support of broadband expansion. This is one of those areas where the needs outpace the dollars, but we're hoping to continue to make progress on that front. So given the level of interest in this specific funding opportunity and the quality of the proposals received, there are multiple sets of applications that could reasonably be awarded CPF grant funding. In an effort to offer alternatives that maximize funding, balance applicant diversity, and target our highest need areas, all within the bounds of the Treasury guidance, staff developed 3 specific alternatives for awarding these CPF funds. Alternative 1 would maximize available funding to applications with the highest merit score based on available funding and the removal of the applications recommended as ineligible in our previous decision item, which I understand has not been fully decided yet. Alternative 2 would emphasize diversifying applicant entity types, taking into consideration the finding that a large share of highly scoring applicants are cooperatives. And then alternative 3 would emphasize providing benefits to localities defined as high need in conjunction with federal guidance indicating that funding should prioritize service to economically distressed communities that were disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and are at higher risk for future disaster due to lack of investment in access to critical services such as broadband. I did spend considerable time reviewing the application proposals and weighing the scoring criteria against the available funding. Here, the Commission is charged with applying its discretion and special expertise on broadband expansion strategy and related policy matters in order to select the applications that best serve the public interest. I also want to commend our staff for their diligence in thinking and overthinking and rethinking and making sure that the scoring and the guidance and all of those things were as best as they could be. So I do give a lot of deference to that review panel scoring and that the Treasury guidance ensures that the decision is transparent and fully supported by the record of evidence here. So absent a clear alternative to those things, I believe the fair and reasonable guidance established by the Treasury and the scoring of the review panel compel me to support awarding funding to the highest scoring projects, which puts me at alternative 1. And now we can hear from Commissioner Nieto on this one.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I agree with you that I think the staff review panel presented 3 really strong options, and I found alternatives 1 and 3 to be particularly well-suited to our state's ongoing broadband expansion strategy and to the criteria and emphasis that Treasury has placed on this funding as well. But I thought all 3 options were reasonable and also commend the staff for the excellent, thorough review and analysis of these. Ultimately, I found alternative 3 among those good alternatives to be the most appealing, with alternative 3 taking the projects that were at the top of the highest scoring and then adding in high-scoring projects that had a particularly strong focus on at-risk, high-need areas of the state. I found that alternative to be particularly compelling in its totality, and I would take that alternative 3 and do a couple of minor modifications to it that would essentially focus all of the funds on areas of the state and communities that don't have any existing service or overlap. And it would at the same time, deprioritize some of the projects that did have significant overlap percentages. They were good projects as well, but just in terms of prioritizing the limited funding that we had, one thing that I looked at was focusing that investment and avoiding that opportunity cost of funding some of these areas that had served percentages of 19% or higher. So I did prepare a handout to show what that alternative 3 would look like with some modifications, which would ultimately be an alternative 4, and something that I'd like to share with you and can walk through what's in that handout as well for consideration.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we walk through the handout, and then we'll just take a break to look at that and talk about it separately. Thank you.
So what is in the handout? This is alternative 3. It is removing grant application numbers 571 and 544 and replacing them instead with 3 projects, 539, 473, and 464, bringing us to a total of 41.989 million, approximately. And a couple of notes on this would essentially be the grant number 571, the Bug Tussle project. As described in the memo, that project at the time that the application was filed had a 0% service overlap with FCC-served locations, but with the most recent FCC data, it was shown that that area has around a 30% overlap. So this refocuses the dollars to some projects that have essentially a 0% overlap. I thought the Astria project in Clark County agreed with the memo that it was a good project. We did have another project in Clark County, the Spectrum project, that came in at a lower dollar amount, served quite a few people, and would allow for a few more projects to be added in the list, which was the reason for that modification to Clark County. And then the addition of the Serenity project in Langlade and the Union Tell projects both allowed us to diversify across the state geographically and spread the funding to more unserved areas and to one particular area that was also identified as pretty high at risk.
Okay.
That's the summary of the handout.
Thank you. I appreciate your summary, and I appreciate you putting this together for us. So we are going to take a break to review those things separately, and we will be back. Thank you. Okay, we're back in. Thank you. We're going to finish our discussion on awards. Then we're going to discuss our last decision point, which is on project reconciliation. And then we'll go back to the second decision point on eligibility. So thank you guys for being patient with us. Thank you, Christy, for your creative offerings here. And thank you to the staff for taking time to walk us through these. I also just want to note that if the commission doesn't reach a consensus on this funding decision today, we'll just hold over our decision so we can further review the funding options and consult with staff to ensure compliance and eligibility. So on this point specifically, the commission's previous broadband funding decisions have been highly scrutinized, as many of you are aware. And since then, the PSC has implemented process improvements to appropriately respond to that scrutiny. And as the chair and delegated commissioner on this issue, I am confident that the process that was used to arrive at alternative one was open, transparent, defensible, and that the projects are best aligned with the Treasury guidance that we're bound by. Just here, I can't say the same for other alternatives with modifications. Further, I do feel that alternative one did properly consider high-need localities. However, I think that that aspect of the merit criteria was weighted slightly differently in order to reasonably balance the Treasury guidelines without over-prioritizing one aspect of those over others. And moreover, I didn't see anything specific in the record that persuaded me to emphasize one criteria more than another, especially in light of the fact that we will have similar programs with even greater funding opportunities available for projects like these in the future. So therefore, I am going to remain at alternative one, but Commissioner Nieto, give you a chance to weigh in on that as well.
Thank you, Chair Strand. I may need a short 5-minute break, but can take that after we discuss the remaining items or take it in any order that you would prefer.
Okay, let's go on to reconciliation and see if we can reach consensus on that and eligibility, and then we'll see what we're going to do. Okay, so project reconciliation, which is the fourth decision point in this item, is in regard to the reconciliation process and whether or not the commission finds it appropriate to work with awardees to adjust the project scope to incorporate straggler locations into these CPF projects. So as noted in our memo, it would be likely a simpler and more cost-effective to reach straggler locations through this funding award rather than through separate BEAD-supported projects. However, if we don't explicitly include that option as part of the awardee's grant agreement, straggler locations would become eligible for BEAD, and the commission would be required to conduct a separate grant allocation process to identify and service provider and allocate new funding to build out these locations. Therefore, here, we are being asked to consider whether it's appropriate to authorize commission staff at the discretion of the delegated commissioner for broadband, where practicable, to work with awardees to adjust the project scope prior to executing grant agreements to incorporate straggler locations into projects so as to avoid delays in deployment to these locations and to avoid duplication with BEAD. So here I am supportive of alternative one, which would direct our staff to review awarded projects and make adjustments to project scopes to require inclusion of straggler locations at the discretion of the delegated commissioner. And the reason that I'm here is I believe it's reasonable, flexible, and an efficient approach to addressing the issue of straggler locations. Commissioner Nieto?
I agree, and I was at alternative one for this one.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think we'll go back to eligibility and then figure out what we want to do about awards. So just to further our discussion on eligibility and why I was at alternative one, in my opinion, provides transparency as to why those 5 applications weren't included in our alternatives 1, 2, and 3 that were offered by staff. And I just want to note that it's my understanding that eligibility decisions made in this docket are separate and distinct from future eligibility and award decisions. They wouldn't directly or necessarily impact the ability of similar projects to be their eligibility status in the future. So I'm going to stay at alternative one on that one. And then my only other point on this is that at 3, alternative 3, saying it doesn't matter because they weren't recommended for funding. But the reason that they weren't recommended for funding is because the staff recommendation is that they're ineligible for funding, and that's why they weren't included in those 3. So I think it's important to try to make that determination clearly. Otherwise, we might open ourselves up to further scrutiny and issues regarding if they're not ineligible, why weren't they included in the recommendations? So that's why I'm staying at alternative 1 on that one.
That makes sense. I had gone through kind of similar thoughts about the pros and cons of the different alternatives and approaches here. One thing that led me to alternative 3 that I still have a slight remaining concern about is the nuance of the 2 applications that are flagged as compliance issues, not necessarily being in conflict with that express eligibility criteria that was provided. That doesn't mean that the compliance issues shouldn't be considered in the award and merit list. It just didn't, to me, specifically rise to the level of an express eligibility issue. So one potential nuanced pathway to take that might resolve what we're both looking at here and kind of these objectives would be potentially the Alt 2 and naming those first 3 as eligibility issues and declining to identify the 2 compliance issues as eligibility issues.
Okay. So I can't foresee a situation where we would be faulted for not awarding someone who's having compliance issues, which is why I was, again, at 1. I understand that there is a distinction between eligibility versus compliance that you would like to draw. I think to not waste any more time, and because it seems like we're still at an impasse on that and on awards, I think we would probably be best served today if we hold over the eligibility decision and the awards decision and bring it back next week for a meeting on March 14th, if you can support that.
Chair Strand, we'd like to take 5 minutes of a break and come back if that works for you as well.
Yeah, we can do that. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are back in. Commissioner Nieto?
All right, thank you for that 5-minute break. In terms of eligibility and the award decisions, I think we can come to a decision here today. As I had mentioned earlier, in terms of the award decisions, I thought 1 and 3 were particularly strong options in the first place, and that we really have multiple good pathways to make an impact. So I'm happy to join you at alternative 1 for the funding of the awards. In terms of eligibility as well, I do think it's just a minor nuanced choice in how you want to clarify the specific ways that these are being reviewed and categorized. And I think they produce the same overall result. And I just don't have major substantive issues with determining that these projects are ineligible. So we can, I can join you there on eligibility as well.
Okay, thank you. So just to recap, I think we're in agreement on the 4 decision points. And then we would just need a motion to approve the Capital Projects Fund Broadband Infrastructure Grant Awards consistent with the discussion. Do you need any clarification on any of the decision
So
points?
for the awards, you're joining Summer.
At alternative
Commissioners
1.
At alternative 1.
Yep.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Ready for a motion?
thank you.
I move we award the funding made available under the American Rescue Plan Act to the Wisconsin broadband projects pursuant to today's discussion, and that the division draft an order consistent with our discussion.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So that does conclude our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for next Thursday, March 14th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. So the only thing we need is a motion to adjourn.
I move we stand adjourned until March 14, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.